So, I'm Victor Schoenbach, and I have the great privilege today of having an interview with Dr. Barbara Sorensen Hulka. Today is July the 8th, 2015. Dr. Hulka was a professor in the Department of Epidemiology and the chair of the department for 10 years and has had many other accomplishments about which you'll hear shortly. So, again, I'm so grateful to you for doing this interview with me.
Thank you.
And I'll add, for the record, that I'm so grateful to you for all the support you gave me over many years. I mean, like my whole career, essentially. You probably don't remember, but it was your suggestion that got me to present my first professional meeting paper at the Society for Epidemiologic Research back in 1981, I think it was.
Great.
I was going to present something else. You said, no, your dissertation research.
Yeah.
So that was from then on, and then when you became chair, of course, you hired me onto the tenure track, and you helped me with grants and papers and just everything. So.
Yeah, well.
The one thing I feel terrible about is that I don't edit myself well. You asked me once if I would be associate chair of the department. And I hated to turn you down, but I just thought, no, I'm not really good for administration.
I sort of remember that, and I wasn't clear in my mind, why you did that, because I didn't feel that. I felt that you were very good in relationships with people.
Well,
but
that's kind, and maybe I am in the relationships part, but administration involves some other things.
Well, getting things done, you always got things done.
Yeah. Well,
who knows?
Anyway, some other interview we can talk about that. But I felt terrible about doing that, and I've always regretted that I didn't help you as much as you helped me. But you certainly, I owe my career a great deal of it to you.
Well, thank you so much.
So this isn't my interview. This is your interview. So
okay.
So could you tell me a little bit about? I know we have this interview from endeavors, which I will rely on a lot.
Yeah.
A little bit about your early. You were born in.
I was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota, yes, and I lived there till I was about 6, and then I moved with my parents to Duluth, Minnesota, an even colder place, significantly colder.
Really?
Yes, at the tip of Lake Superior, and I lived there till I was 15, and then I spent a year in Minneapolis again and went to the university high school for 1 year, and then I went off to college. I wasn't doing much in high school in terms of the academic parts of things. Well, there wasn't much to do. That was particularly in Duluth. Mm-hmm. I hate to admit it, but I didn't go to school very regularly. It would be frowned upon today. And my father was actually the president of what was the Duluth State Teachers College. And he was a psychologist, an educational psychologist. And I am amazed to this day. They never, if I didn't want to go to school, I'd stay home and practice. And they didn't push me to go to school.
That is extraordinary.
And I guess it is extraordinary. And I guess they figured, well, she doesn't want to go to school. She's not out in the street.
But you're playing violin.
I was practicing the violin, and I was practicing the piano, and I think I took a few voice lessons, and I managed to stay busy.
Yeah, well, that's very productive.
Yes. So, but then I went off to college.
And just tell me, what was your mother was a homemaker? Or?
She was a homemaker. She had gone to college, and I think she had gotten a master's degree or worked toward it in home economics. My parents had met at St. Cloud. I don't know, university, college. It was the part of the college system for the University of Minnesota. Mm-hmm. And they had met there. And I had no siblings, and this did not bother me. I enjoyed all the attention of my parents. But I went off to college, and I went to Radcliffe, which was a wonderful place, and I didn't know how wonderful it was.
What led you to go to Radcliffe in Minnesota?
I wanted to go where there was good music. And I had a yen. I applied to Wellesley. I remember that because they told me to go back to high school for another year. Radcliffe was very nice. They gave me a regional scholarship because at that time, well, I suppose it's still true, there was such a preponderance of the New England folks going to Radcliffe that they wanted to get girls from elsewhere.
And you were how old when you went to Radcliffe?
I was 16.
Oh, no wonder they Wellesley said go back.
Yeah, and, but I enjoyed it very much. Again, I'm afraid I neglected some wonderful opportunities on the academic side of things, but what I didn't realize then, I realize now how wonderful all the music was, the people I played music with, the chamber music groups, the Harvard Radcliffe Orchestra, as well as the opportunities to hear music, but playing music and some of the people I played with were exceptional. And I realize this now, it was just, and then I decided to go to Juilliard. So I went there for a couple of years, got a master's degree, and Jerry, whom I had met at college, we met playing a trio for piano, violin, and French horn, the Brahms Horn Trio. It's really a prototype for that combination of instruments, and that's how we met. And we played it many, many times since, at medical meetings and places here and there. But I went to Juilliard, and Jerry and I got married during that time. I did an extra year I started pre-medical work at Columbia. If you want me to look at the
No,
camera.
you can or not, I was just checking something.
Yeah, sure. I did pre-medical work while I was at Juilliard, and then I had an extra year doing more pre-medical work because I had not done that. And then I went to Columbia Medical School, and from there I did an internship, boards in preventive medicine.
All up in Columbia?
Well, yes, the internship was on Staten Island in the Public Health Service Hospital, but then we went to Pittsburgh. I ran a cervical cancer screening program there, and it was during that time that I did the appropriate things in order to get board certification in preventive medicine. I remember Abraham Lilienfeld was one of my questioners, examiners.
Oh my goodness.
Right, for the boards. I really flubbed up on some question there with him. I sort of remember that. It had to do with screening.
I was screening. Well,
Yeah.
you certainly
So-
must have learned in the meantime
I learned
what
a
the
little
answer
bit
was.
after that. He, I guess, had hope for me. But so then we moved here to Chapel Hill, and it was Jerry who had the position with obstetrics and gynecology and also the population center. And as I said in that article, I was the trailing spouse. But I, right away, I had done my year of academic public health training at Columbia before we moved. And so I had my MPH, but how much epidemiology is that? You know, of course, there wasn't as much to epidemiology as probably could be said about many fields at that time as there is now. But I came here, I met John Castle right away. I made a point to make an appointment with him right away. And we got along. I think that was I know that was a much easier time to appoint particularly untenured assistant professors than it would be today. And so I think he had a fair amount of flexibility. And there was a grant in health services research. Health services research was making, well, I think sort of an initial presence. It's since then had ins and outs and ups and downs, but quality of care issues, accessibility to care, these were all big issues. And we wrote a grant. I did quite a bit of it. That's what I did in my first year, and was told later I had an excellent introductory section in terms of reviewing the relevant literature by people who reviewed it. And we got that grant in health services research.
Is that Fort Wayne?
Fort Wayne, Indiana, exactly. That was it. So that got me going. That got me here.
And that was the first health services research project in the department, wasn't it? Or the first major one?
I think so, because it was pretty new at that time. That concept of health services research and the funding for it was starting up. And I'm trying to think of this, some of the names of the people, some quite famous people, Williams. I'm trying to think, very much into function, activities of daily living for older people. I guess we could look at the CV here and see some of these people because...
Was that somebody in the Department of Epidemiology?
No, I think he was in medicine. One's on my mind on these things.
Well,
they
you
say,
probably haven't thought about...
I haven't thought about it. I looked at this CV right before you came and I thought, that's a different person. I don't know that I know this person. I know her, but it's so long ago.
What is her name? Or
his name. Well, that's what I was looking to see if I could find him. But I guess I didn't write something with him.
Oh, it doesn't
but
matter.
John Castle, of course, was very prominent, and he was on many of these papers. He worked with us, of course. He was the PI on the grant. And maybe if I looked here, I could even tell you the name of the grant.
That's okay. I can look that kind of thing up.
Okay.
For sure.
Fine.
So I'm interested, as you know, in John Castle.
Yes.
And the founding of the department, of what you know about it. You came in '67, so it was already a going concern by then.
It was a going concern, and I did not know the man who I think originated the department. And
Sidney Clark.
Sidney Clark. Didn't he originate the department?
He was the first. Well, actually, Edward McGavin was the first chair of the department, I believe,
right.
and the only faculty member for a while. It's interesting to
Yes.
read. I don't know if you saw the thing that Carl Schei found in the archives, some reports from the 50s.
Really?
And Ed McGavin is writing this report as the dean, saying, and as chair of the department, I'm doing such and such, and he's teaching all these courses. We complain about our course teaching loves that. He's teaching all these courses with his 10% time in the Department of Epidemiology.
Oh, really?
Plus he's the dean. Yeah, I'll be sure to send it to you.
My gosh.
So he was the first chair, but he
Yeah.
wasn't full-time chair. And Sidney Clark then was brought in not as the permanent chair, but to essentially establish the department.
Right.
And then Sidney Clark recommended John Castle to be the first permanent chair.
So
And Sidney Clark was from South Africa by way of Israel.
Yes.
So they knew, he knew John Castle from South Africa.
So we're good.
So,
And Cecil Sloan, Ralph Patrick,
mhm.
they were there. Caroline Becker, I believe, had just come at that time. Joan Huntley was getting her PhD, or she was an instructor, or it was that interim kind of period. I remember our youngest child, well, how old was he? He was slightly over a year, but I remember bringing him at one point to the hospital, to the school and to the department, and carrying him around. I was seeing John Castle about something. I don't know what the other two were doing, but I had to bring him along. He was fine. Somebody said, "Oh, I'll be glad to take care of him." I think it was Violet Kroll.
Oh,
But
yes.
if he cries, I won't know what to do. So, remember Violet Kroll?
I do remember Vi, sure,
Yeah.
sure. Now, I didn't actually realize she was there in the 60s.
Well, I can't swear to that.
Uh-huh.
But I seem to remember her, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, she was there
As
quite a
being
while.
there, that she was the one that offered to hold him.
That was before Joyce Allen's time.
Oh, yes, that was before Joyce Allen.
And before Ed Wagner's time, I suppose, too.
Yes.
So,
Those are the people that I remember.
mm-hmm.
being there.
Well, Al Tyroler.
Oh, El Tyroler, of course.
Would have been
Al
there.
was there.
And David Jenkins, was he there?
David Jenkins may have been there.
Uh-huh.
I think he was.
Uh-huh. And Steve Szanski?
Steve Szanski and I
Was
wrote
he there too?
papers together.
Really? Oh.
Oh, we did. I liked Steve so much.
And of course, Bert Kaplan was there.
And Bert Kaplan was there. Now, there was many people. The department was quite large at that time. I didn't realize that. Yeah, Steve was sort of, he and I got along very well. We worked on measurements. He was a psychometrician.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've had any contact with
We've
him.
exchanged a couple of emails.
Here we are. So he's well then.
Oh, well, he was as of about
Yeah.
3 or 4 years ago.
I think he had I think his wife had some illness, and that would have been quite a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been in touch with him. Scale for the measurement of attitudes toward physicians and primary medical care. And that was an article in Medical Care in 1970. I'm seeing what else Steve and I had. And I know that well, excuse me, I'm
No.
seeing things in here that
Did I write this?
totally forgotten about. Well, I told you that I ran a cervical cancer screening program in Pittsburgh, and so look here, motivation techniques in a cancer detection program, contact by mail and person. Motivation techniques in a cancer detection program, utilization of community resources. One in Public Health Reports, the other in American Journal of Public Health. So I started in this sort of behavioral motivation sort of issue, and then atypical cervical cytology and its relationship to trichomoniasis therapy. That was quite interesting. Cytological and histological outcomes following an atypical cervical smear. And then, why pelvic examinations and cervical cancer screening? And I did that with a nurse who worked on the project.
Do you remember any of the other students, the number of outstanding kind of students from that era that you worked with?
I'm looking. I remember actually Larry Cooper just came. He had gotten his degree, I think, in mathematical statistics or something.
Mm-hmm.
But he and I started working together very early on. And I know we had a paper in here. Oh, well, you were asking about students.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just
Well,
looking.
Larry was a student.
Well, he wasn't when he
Not by
came
the time.
here.
Not by the time you started working.
And when I see a paper, I, Castle, and Shirley Thompson, if you remember her, she was a student. Shirley was in a paper with Steve, John Castle, myself, on scale for the measurement of attitudes toward physicians and primary medical care. I mentioned that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, well, Carol Redmond, that goes back to Pittsburgh. And here's one with Larry Cooper, John Castle, and Shirley Thompson. A method for measuring physician awareness of patient concerns. And Thompson, Castle, Szanski, and Hulka. Satisfaction with medical care in a low-income population. That was Journal of Chronic Diseases. Here's another one with Szanski. And here's with Larry Cooper. An epidemiological test of the, in quotes, spectrum of disease concept in cervical neoplasia. So Shirley Thompson, I'm seeing her come up here a lot. She went to South Carolina. She was on the faculty. She and another one of our former students. In fact, and I'll find the other student, I think became the chair of the department, and Shirley stayed on. I visited them once there. I'm just looking for other students. Yes, Shirley. Here are many of the people from the American College of Family Practice who we work with. Oh, I'm finding more people here. Do you remember Mary Daly?
I
Maybe
know
you
of
don't.
her. I didn't
Yes.
know her personally, but her name was mentioned a few times to me.
We had a paper here of talking with the doctor, Journal of Communication. I'm finding all sorts of interesting things.
Well, the department was a lot less formal in those years, I imagine. I mean, I know there weren't as many required courses, for example.
You know, it's interesting to say not so formal. I don't think there were as many university rules and regulations. Just like I was
Sure.
saying, it was relatively easy, I think, for John Castle to appoint me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just think the rules and regulations were just fewer
Mm-hmm.
and kind of less, well, if I use the word confining or
Mm-hmm.
demanding.
Well, sure, and the school was a lot smaller.
Oh, yes, and the department was smaller, many fewer students too. I'm looking for more students, and what I'm finding is a lot of these people from the American, the family practice.
And were more
Physicians
of our
were.
students physicians in those days?
I think they were. I think there were more physicians, and we had many foreign students,
Mm-hmm.
and they were most all physicians. One of the interesting things I've noted during the years was in the early years, they were mostly men.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, the faculty, I think Caroline Becker, who came from Duke, and she got a lab in infectious disease. And I know something about this because Jerry got a lab, and I'm not sure if they shared or they were adjacent to each other, but they had some communication over laboratory space.
Ah.
And then Joan Huntley, who was then Joan Cornoni, as I say, she was moving into a faculty position
Mm-hmm.
when I came there, but everybody else was men. Everyone else was or were. Everyone was.
Was a man, I think.
Everyone was a man. Everyone was a man. And most of the students
Were male.
were, and then of course we saw the shift. I remember talking to David Savitz when he became chair that we're going to have to change our, the minority. The majority has now become the minority, and we've got to do something about it.
I was an entering student in 1977.
77.
And there were 20 students in my group, my cohort.
20 students.
And would you like to guess how many were women?
In 1970?
77.
77, all right, 77. Out of 25.
Actually, there was one.
Really?
Now that was an anomaly.
Yes, okay.
And it never happened again. But somehow only one woman was admitted, Donna Craigle.
Donna Craigle, yes,
And,
very good.
And Caroline Becker allegedly stormed into Michelle Ibrahim's office. And it never happened again.
I can't imagine. I was about to say, oh my goodness, I'm glad it was 77. I wasn't chair when that happened.
It would not have happened when you were chair, I'm sure.
But no, we saw the other thing. We saw the other thing, and I don't know what you see now, but a large majority were women.
I think it's 3/4 now. It might be
Yeah.
2/3, but I think
Yeah,
it's 3/4.
in that range, yeah. That's about what we saw.
Mhm.
And
Well, it was a combination of things. There's the shift away from physicians,
yes,
and that's
Yes.
part of it. Though, of course,
True.
medical care is now, women are much, much more prominent in medical school.
absolutely. Yeah.
And I don't know, my mother used to say that men go where the money is.
There's an element to that that I hope I don't offend anyone by saying it, but we're going to see all sorts of shifts, I believe, now with the change in structure of medical care. And of course, many, many women, I don't know if there are more women in medical school now than men, or the last I looked into it was about equal.
Mm-hmm. I think so.
And but it takes time to see more women in the upper echelons of faculty and administration
Absolutely.
at universities, medical schools.
Sure.
So
Sure.
I'm not worried about the women. I think
All right.
they do just fine.
I don't think you do need to worry. In fact, my prediction, this is obviously very informal here, it's
Yeah.
not going to be peer-reviewed. Women are a majority of the population.
Yeah,
They're
are.
a great majority of the voting population.
That's interesting.
They are much more social communicative than men. And so I actually predict that once physical force diminished in its role in society, at least in the developed world, that women are going to essentially be the dominant sex.
I won't live long enough to see that.
Well,
Vic, I'd
you
like
know,
to.
it's
I
happening.
mean, like
It's
to,
happening
but-
right in front of our eyes. I mean, there's long way to go, no question about
A
it.
long way to
But
go.
you look at the trajectory.
But you make a very good point. As we become, in quotes, I don't know if I use the word civilized, but if wars would become less frequent or less violent or less lethal,
Well, we're a long way from that, I
that
think.
word, yeah.
Globally, it's going to take a lot longer, of course. But in the United States and in Europe, if you're relying on democracy and you're not letting people be physically violent to each other, which we
Yes.
have restrained to a great extent, I don't see why women won't become the dominant power. It takes a while because, as you know, it has to.
I don't think my daughter even will see that.
Oh, we'll see. We'll see.
So,
We'll see. Maybe in 10 years we can come back and revisit this.
oh, I'm looking. There's Nancy Woods. Do you remember Nancy Woods?
Again, by name only.
She's a very, very fine student. And she was a nurse by background. She went out to, I could be wrong on this, to Seattle, and she was chair of nursing or some department out there. She became very well known. Greg Liptak, yes, I think he was a physician. Here's Mary Daly again, Carol Hogue, and well, Bernie Greenberg. I think I have a paper with his son.
Oh, Ray
Greenberg, yeah. You asked about students, and now you've got me really interested.
But now we're getting into the modern
Okay,
era, so
okay,
let me
okay,
come
I
back
won't
to.
all right.
I wanted to ask you about John Castle because
Sure.
you worked with him quite a
Oh,
bit.
I worked with him quite a bit.
What can you tell me about John?
He was a really fine person, very intelligent, very, he related very well with people. I think he was a very fine person in terms of quality and humanitarian, civilized behavior, and I mean that not in a superficial way,
Mm-hmm.
but as a good human being. He was very good to work with. He was very supportive. He was very helpful. He had 4 daughters.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure he was a very devoted father and husband. He lived right down the street here
Uh-huh.
on Lake Shore, North Lake Shore.
Michelle told me that he and his wife hosted his wedding reception.
I did not know that. Well, then Michelle really knew him. I did not realize that. Well, Michelle lived right around the corner,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Right on Redbud, I
Yeah.
think it was.
Yes, that is right around the corner. So, and then David lived across the street.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll quit looking then I'm seeing some of these students. It's really interesting. I'd love to know what happened to some of these people. And some I know did very well.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe I'll be able to find out some of that. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm working my way through the various
Yes.
tiers of the department, and I haven't
Yes.
gotten to the students yet, but I hope to certainly be in touch with
Yeah.
some of them, interview some of
Well,
them.
you've got this CV, so you can see
Mhm.
all the students.
But so about John,
John,
my
more about
understanding
John.
is, I mean, his
Yeah.
intellect is really remarkable.
His
He's
intellect
an
is
among
remarkable. He
faculty.
gave wonderful lectures. He taught Epi 160,
Mm-hmm.
the course for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was before there was, at one time they divided up so that Epi students got a different 160. But this was before that.
When you came, if my memory serves, he taught the lecture,
He taught the
And
lecture.
then there was a lab
That's
for
right.
various groups, and faculty led the labs.
That's correct.
Including John led one, and I think he led the one for epi majors.
That may have been so, because I remember I started in September of 1967 with the department, and I told him, well, yes, of course I expect to run one of the labs. And he was kind of surprised. Maybe, I don't know, if he thought I didn't know enough epidemiology, or he didn't expect me to do it right away the first season or the first fall. But I went to all his lectures and found them very informative and very enjoyable and very interesting. He was an excellent lecturer, and I think many other faculty did too. Where he got it all, I'll never know, because I had been through the major textbooks, generally knew the topics, but he had more to offer.
That was my introduction to epidemiology, was sitting in Epi 160 back in 1972. And I remember after the first lecture, I walked out, I said, I have never heard a lecture like this in university. In my years in university,
right?
This was the most inspiring faculty member I had heard.
Yes.
I have the lectures still,
Really?
the notes, yeah, and they are still inspiring.
Well,
Which lab did you teach? Do you remember?
well, which one were they?
There was a cardiovascular, a cancer, there was an infectious diseases, probably Caroline Becker had
I'm
that
not
one.
sure we were that structured.
Oh, really? In the 60s? Maybe not in the 60s. I'm talking about in 72.
Yeah,
when I came.
yes, I know.
Cecil Sloan did one on chronic diseases.
Yes, and at one time, but it wasn't right away, I worked with him on one of the chronic disease or cardiovascular disease we had. But I do not remember the specifics in terms of having a specific track. I think there was something on infectious disease, but mostly chronic diseases. But it was pretty much determined. I don't believe I picked the materials that were used. I think they were.
Well, right. I think the labs were the same across the various. Labs. I mean the assignments. The homeworks were the same across the different sections.
But that was probably, that's what I mean. I didn't.
Because I remember we bought a lab book, at least in '72.
Yes.
That's my first acquaintance with it.
Well, in '67, my first try at it. All I know is it was pre-assigned. I didn't pick what the lab was going to be. It was pre-assigned, and I guess everybody else had the same work.
Now, was Abdul Omran there then?
Well, when did Abdul Omran come? Was he there in '67? I can't swear to it. I knew K. Omran better than Abdul, actually. Kay Omran did some work with Jared.
She was an OBGYN, wasn't she?
Yes. I don't know if she was OBGYN trained. She eventually went on and got training in family medicine and became a family medicine doctor. She was on the faculty in one of the family medicine departments at one of the medical schools in Washington, D.C. After she left here, after they left here. So she really changed her direction, more power to her, and in a direction that was a lot of work. She had to go through a residency, and then...
Wow.
And she was very good again in that sense of relating very well to people. Were they here in '67? I can't say, or did they come very shortly thereafter?
Maybe I can probably look that up.
Yes, I don't know for sure. I never had worked directly with Abdul, so I didn't know him. Actually, I worked with Kay Omran on a project. I think it was I'd gotten a nice little grant on cervical cancer and herpes, which turned out to be a false, in quotes, relationship. But we had a little study doing, and this was, she was going to provide the laboratory work for it, because we had bloods through Curtis Hames. Of course, there were all sorts of problems with it. The blood had been stored in freezers up in his hot attic. Kay and I went there,
Mhm.
Yes, we did, and we stayed there a few nights and visited Curtis Hames and pulled bloods from the freezers to do an analysis for antibodies to herpes.
Hmm.
It never got published.
Hmm.
There was somebody else in Atlanta who was well known in that area and was very hot on the track of herpes type 2. And I think he reviewed it. I don't know, he didn't like our article. Maybe just as well.
I didn't know that they had good antibody tests for herpes in those
Well, it may
days.
not have been good. That may have been part of the problem. I was insecure, frankly,
Well,
of what was going on in the lab.
mm-hmm.
Nobody's fault.
Yeah.
It was just, I had uncertainties about it, plus these problems with the bloods that
Yeah.
God knows what had, where they'd been, what their, what do you call it, Provence, their,
Oh,
his-
Providence or something? No.
you know what I'm thinking
Yeah,
of.
yeah.
What
Where
their-
they came from. How the
where
chain
they
of-
came, the chain of
custody
events,
or-
chain of custody, exactly, I
Mhm.
think was, so there were problems. It was theoretically a great little study, a nested case control. It
Uh-huh.
was great, I thought it was so cute.
Well,
But it never ended up in a journal.
uh-huh. Well, I've got more of those than I like to think about.
Oh, well, I guess I went on to other journals, if they, but not with this particular thing anyway.
So, Evans County, were you involved in the Evans County study at all?
Not really, except for this little niche.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't with the Evans County.
But you did know Curtis Hames, and
I
they
knew
used to have Curtis Hames
Day,
Days every year. I
Curtis
think.
Hames Day, that's right. What I remember about is Kay and I, we were in a bedroom with twin beds, and what I remember so well is the difference in our night attire when she and I, she looked very glamorous and I did not. So she's a very fine person.
This was in Curtis Hames's house?
Well, I
Or-
can't remember. I don't think it was his home,
Uh-huh.
but I couldn't swear to it, but it was a